Some of you must have met my wife Vashti. She's somewhere there at the back. She does maintenance work, but let's be honest, a room like this was never really built for her.
He stood under the lights and told 400 people his wife was nothing but a woman who carried other people's trash to the curb. What he didn't know was that she owned the curb, the building, and the company that signed his check. Before we get into how she made that room learn her name in under 60 seconds, stay with me, because the moment she lifts her hand is the moment his whole life ends and hers finally begins. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The city was Charlotte, and the building was the Ashford Meridian Tower, 41 floors of glass rising over South Tryon Street, the kind of building people photographed at sunset without ever knowing who paid to keep the lights on. 400 employees filled the atrium that night for the company's annual Ascension Gala, an event built to celebrate the people climbing the ladder, though almost nobody in that room had ever stopped to ask who owned the ladder itself. They knew the polished floors. They knew the open bar. They knew their paychecks landed every other Thursday without fail, and they assumed, the way people always assume about things that simply work, that the company ran itself. Near the back wall, away from the crowd gathering by the stage, stood a woman in a plain navy dress and low black flats, a small leather case tucked under one arm, like she might need to leave in a hurry. Her name was Vashti Calloway, though most of the room, if they noticed her at all, would have guessed she worked for catering. Remember her face. Everything shining in that room that night, every promotion, every bonus, every bottle of champagne being poured, existed because of decisions she had made quietly for 15 years. To the 399 other people in that room, she was a stranger standing near the coat check. She had built it that way on purpose, and by the end of that night, she would tear it down just as carefully. The program moved the way these things always move. A slow parade of smaller names read off a card while a host in a rented tuxedo kept the energy high. A junior analyst got moved into a management track, and her father stood up in the third row with his phone out, recording, his hands shaking with pride. Vashti watched that man film his daughter and felt something warm and aching in her chest, because she was the one who had approved that promotion 11 days earlier from a laptop at her kitchen table at 1 in the morning, and nobody in that family would ever know her name was attached to it. Then the lights narrowed to a single hard circle on the stage, and Cassius Danforth walked into it like he'd been rehearsing the walk his whole life. He had the kind of face that made rooms go quiet before he even opened his mouth. Sharp jaw, easy smile, a suit that had clearly been altered twice to sit exactly right on his shoulders. He tapped the microphone, more out of habit than necessity, and the crowd hushed the way a crowd only hushes for someone they've already decided to admire. 11 years ago, he said, I walked through those doors with a resume that had more gaps in it than experience, and a landlord who was 2 weeks from changing my locks. A ripple of warm laughter. Tonight, they're handing me the keys to the southeast region. The applause rolled through the atrium, and he let it wash over him the way a man lets sunlight fall on his face. Slow, greedy, unhurried. Then his eyes drifted toward the back wall, found his wife standing near the coats in her plain navy dress, and something small and cruel in him decided he couldn't resist the opening she'd handed him just by existing. Now I know some of you have met my wife, he said, and a few people were already laughing before they understood why. Vashti, she's back there somewhere. She does maintenance work, cleaning contracts, that kind of thing. Hard-working woman, don't get me wrong. A pause, timed like a punchline. But let's be honest, a room like this was never really built for her. The laughter came easy, the way it does when a powerful man standing in the light gives permission for a whole room to look down on someone standing in the dark. A few heads turned to find her, hungry for her reaction. Vashti gave them nothing. She kept both hands folded over the leather case, and inside it, though not a single person in that atrium could have guessed, sat an old brass key that had belonged to her father, worn smooth on one edge, from 40 years riding in his shirt pocket. From the front row, a second voice rang out, older and sharper and delighted with itself. Odette Danforth, Cassius's mother, sat with her chin lifted and her pearls catching the light. "Finally," she said, loud enough to carry 3 rows back, "a woman who actually fits this family." Because now, stepping up beside Cassius, came the other one, Talia Renard, 29, a project coordinator 2 floors down who had spent the better part of a year making Cassius feel like the tallest man in every room he walked into. She crossed into the spotlight like it had been holding a place for her, found Vashti's eyes across the crowd for exactly 1 second, and then looked straight through her the way you look through a chair nobody's sitting in. "Hey, babe," Talia called out toward the back wall, sweet as poisoned tea. "Don't wait up tonight," the room roared. Cassius laughed the loudest of anyone. His father, Ezra, was already halfway out of his seat with a glass raised high. His sister, Nadine, standing near the aisle, gave the tight, nervous smile of someone who doesn't want to be the one who ruins the party, though her eyes had already slid off the stage and landed on her sister-in-law, and something uneasy was climbing up the back of her throat. Vashti watched her husband present another woman to a room full of her own employees, inside a building she owned down to the wiring, and she did not cry, and she did not leave. She pressed her thumb once against the leather case, feeling the shape of the key underneath the fabric, the way a person touches an old scar just to be sure it's still there. Here is what the room missed, because the room was too busy laughing. Near the double doors, a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, the head of building security, a man named Marcus Odom who had worked in that tower for 9 years, straightened his back the second Vashti shifted her weight. Like a signal only he could hear had gone off somewhere in the building. A passing server with a tray of empty glasses dipped his head as he moved past her. "Evening, Miss Calloway," he murmured, low and respectful, in a tone that would have looked strange to anyone actually paying attention. Nobody was paying attention. Every eye in that atrium belonged to the beautiful couple standing in the light. Cassius leaned back into the microphone one last time before the formal announcement. "To new beginnings," he said, and turned and kissed Talia slow, right on the cheek, right where the whole room could see it. Vashti turned toward the hallway that ran behind the stage. She wasn't running. She had somewhere to be, and it wasn't yet time to be in that light. Every single person clapping in that room worked for a name they had never once seen written down, and within the hour, they would learn exactly whose hand had been holding the pen the whole time. To understand the woman in the navy dress, you have to leave the tower behind and drive 2 hours east, back through the years, to a small town called Belhaven, North Carolina, where the porch lights come on early, and the crickets do most of the talking after dark. Her father was Elias Calloway, and he ran a 1-room locksmith shop out of a converted garage on Route 9, cutting keys, repairing safes, rekeying doors for half the county whenever somebody moved in, moved out, or got left by somebody they trusted with a copy of their house key. He was a patient, careful man who treated every lock like it deserved respect, and he kept a single brass master key clipped inside his shirt pocket, not because it opened anything special, but because his own father had given it to him, and some things you carry just to remember where you came from. Vashti grew up in the smell of machine oil and warm metal shavings. She was a soft-hearted child, the kind who fixed broken bicycle chains for kids who couldn't pay her, then told her mother she'd done it for free because she liked the practice. Her father watched all of it and never once told her to toughen up. Instead, he told her, "The soft ones survive just fine. They simply have to learn to survive, smarter than everybody counting on them not to." There was a hard year when a big hardware chain opened off the interstate with a key-cutting machine that worked in 90 seconds flat, and the shop's business thinned out to almost nothing. She was 16. She came in after school one evening to find her father sitting alone behind the counter, the ledger open in front of him to a page written in nothing but red ink. He didn't look frightened. He looked like a man in the middle of deciding something important. He reached into his shirt pocket, took out the brass key, and pressed it into her palm, folding her fingers over it one at a time. "A key isn't metal, baby," he told her. "It's a promise. When you hand somebody a key, you're telling them you trust what's on the other side of that door to them. So you never hand your key to a person who's already looking for the exit, and you never let a loud man convince you that quiet hands don't hold real power." She held that key like it might crack in her fist. She didn't fully understand him that night. She would, eventually, understand him completely. He passed 2 years later, his heart giving out on an ordinary Sunday between customers. The shop closed within the year. The debts did not close with it. And Vashti learned the second half of her father's lesson in the hardest way there is, that grief does not slow the world down for anybody. And a young woman with an open heart and empty pockets gets circled fast by people who can smell both. She did not fold. She took a job doing overnight facilities work, emptying trash, running floor buffers, because night shifts paid a little more and asked a lot fewer questions of a girl with no diploma hanging on a wall anywhere. In the daylight hours, while the rest of the world slept, she taught herself the thing her father had never had the time to learn, which was how money actually moved through a building, a contract, a company. How a nobody with a mop and a flashlight could someday become the name carved quietly into the deed of a whole tower. It took her 14 years, and it started with one salvaged facilities contract that 3 bigger companies had already walked away from. A maintenance deal for a half-empty commercial strip that everybody agreed wasn't worth the paperwork. Vashti read every clause the other companies hadn't bothered reading. She found money hiding in the boring, overlooked parts of the agreement nobody wanted to sit with. She made the whole thing worth doing. That one salvaged contract became 2, then a small division, then a company with a real name stamped on the incorporation papers. And that name was Calloway Standard Holdings. By the night of the gala, that one small salvage deal had grown into a holding company that quietly met payroll for close to 400 families every single month. More money moving through her steady hands in a single week than her father's little shop had seen in 30 years of Sundays. She built it without a headline, without a photograph, without a single soul at Ashford Meridian ever learning her face. She kept her father's rule, and she added one of her own, that she would stand behind every name on her payroll, like family, and she would stay entirely out of the light while doing it. She had watched what visibility had cost her father, the circling debt collectors, the smiling men who came close only to take. She decided the safest place to build something real was in the shadows, behind a plain holding company and a title so unremarkable nobody ever thought twice about it. To the staff at Ashford Meridian, the owner existed only as a signature line, a name on paperwork nobody read closely, a person everyone assumed lived far away in a house they'd never see and never bothered wondering about. She married Cassius in the middle of all this building. Back then he was charming and broke and, she believed, honest about being both, and that honesty was the thing that pulled her in. She never told him what she was quietly constructing, not out of secrecy exactly, but out of old habit, old fear, the belief that the moment people learn what you're worth, they stop seeing who you are. So she kept her father's key in a drawer and her name out of the light. and she told herself a good man would never need to know his wife was worth more than she appeared to be. She would learn exactly how wrong that belief was, in her own kitchen, on an ordinary Tuesday night, with a brass key rolling across cold tile. By the final year of the marriage, Cassius had stopped bothering to hide his unhappiness. The problem was never really the money, and it was never Vashti's plain style or her quiet ways. The problem lived somewhere much older than her, buried deep in a boy who had grown up the cousin with the second-hand shoes at every family cookout, the one whose plate always got filled last. Somewhere in all that old shame, he had decided a man is only as large as the room believes him to be. He needed people to turn and look when he walked in. A wife who never seemed to need anything from him, who disappeared into unexplained work and came home past midnight without apology, made him feel small in a way he couldn't name, and refused to forgive. Talia made him feel enormous, and that was her entire gift, one she delivered with real skill. She laughed at exactly the right beats. She leaned into his arm like it was the only steady thing in any room. She told him again and again he was wasting his talent on a woman who scrubbed floors for a living. Talia had grown up hungry too, in a house where the power got shut off more than once, and she had made a cold, clear-eyed calculation somewhere along the way. Cassius's rise to regional director was the most solid ground she'd ever been offered, and she wasn't a monster. She was scared, the particular kind of scared that comes from counting every last dollar in a drawer and coming up short one too many times. Together, Cassius and his mother built a story, because a story is how ordinary people talk themselves into being cruel. In their version, Vashti was the one hiding something. All those late nights, that stubborn silence about her work, it had to be another man somewhere. Odette whispered it first, because Odette had never believed her son should have married a quiet girl from a locksmith shop in Bellhaven, and a whisper gave her permission to finally say out loud what she'd felt for years. "You think a grown woman disappears every night for honest reasons?" Odette said one Sunday dinner, setting her fork down so the words could land properly. "Open your eyes, son. That woman is making a fool of you in front of everybody who matters." Cassius chose to believe it, not because it was true, some part of him surely knew better, but because it was useful. If Vashti was the liar, then he got to be the wronged man, and a wronged man feels righteous about whatever he decides to do next. So he started pushing. First it was the house. He wanted it retitled in his name alone, just to protect the family, he said, holding her hand while he said it. Then it was her voice. She needed to stop mentioning her overnight work, because it embarrassed him now that he was climbing. He wanted her smaller in every visible way, and he told himself she'd never fight any of it, because a woman like that had nothing left to fight with. There was a night he laid the house paperwork on the kitchen table and slid it toward her with 2 fingers, a cheap pen resting on top. "Just sign it, Vashti," he said. "You'll still live here. It's just paperwork. It's about respect." She looked at that page for a long time, and here is the part that tells you exactly how deep the hurt had already gone. She almost signed it. She, who quietly held the keys to nearly 400 families' livelihoods, sat at her own table and nearly signed her own house away to a man already planning his exit, because some tired 16-year-old part of her had started believing him when he said she was nothing. She didn't sign it that night. She told him she'd think about it, and he took that hesitation as a win and left the paperwork sitting on the counter like a flag he'd already planted in the ground. Then came the Tuesday. She got home early, which almost never happened, her head heavy from a day of investor calls no one in her personal life knew she ever took. She heard his voice through the half-open door of his study, low and easy and warmer than he'd been with her in over a year. He had no idea she was standing in the hallway. "Once I've got this title locked in," he was saying, "I'm done with her. I mean it. She's got nothing without me anyway. Nothing. A pause. A soft, ugly little laugh. You'll see. After the gala, it's just you and me. She can keep her cleaning cart. Vashti stood in the dark hallway of her own home and felt the floor go soft underneath her. She didn't slam the door. She didn't scream his name. She walked slowly into the kitchen, sat down on the cold tile, and the leather case slid off her lap and fell open beside her. Her father's brass key rolled out across the floor and came to rest against the leg of a chair. She looked at it lying there and couldn't make her hand reach out to pick it up. How long can a person sit like that? Long enough for the light in the window to slide from gold to gray to nothing at all. Long enough to hear, underneath the hum of the refrigerator, her father's voice from years back, the line about a promise and a door and a man who's already looking for the exit. Slowly, on that floor, she reached out and closed her fingers around the key, the same way she had at 16, one finger at a time, and something in her chest shifted from broken to still. Still was far worse news for the people who had done this to her, because still is exactly where the real decisions get made. She stood up off that floor. She wiped the key clean on her sleeve. She picked up her phone, and for the first time in 14 years, she made a call to her own facilities and events team and arranged one small, precise thing: a front row seat at the following week's gala and a private word with the technician who ran the building's main display wall. She'd spent all those years keeping her name out of the light on purpose. The following week, she was going to let it burn. The atrium was even fuller the second time around. Word had spread that Cassius Danforth was about to be named regional director, and people love watching a man rise, especially one who looks like he was built for it. Ezra had his glass full and raised before anybody had even asked him to toast. This time, Vashti didn't stand at the back wall. She walked in through the main doors in a deep charcoal dress, still plain, but cut clean, cut like a decision already made. She took a seat in the front row, in the family section, directly in the center of the light. Odette's mouth pinched tight the moment she spotted her. Nadine blinked, surprised, and without fully understanding why, shifted an inch closer to her sister-in-law than to her own mother. Cassius climbed the stage steps and didn't see his wife until he was already mid-sentence. When he found her sitting there in the front row, his easy smile flickered once, then set hard. Fine, he thought. Let her watch. Let her see exactly what she'd thrown away. 11 years I gave this company, he said, warming into it. And tonight isn't just about a title. It's about the woman standing beside me, the one who believed in the man I really am, when other people only ever saw a mop and a night shift. He held out his hand. Talia rose from the second row and climbed the 3 steps into the light, and the crowd made that soft, delighted sound a room makes when it thinks it's watching a love story unfold live. Cassius pulled her against his side, looked out over 399 of his own co-workers, looked down once at his wife in the front row, and delivered the line he'd clearly been saving all week. Everybody, he said, I want you to meet the future Mrs. Danforth. Ezra was on his feet before the sentence even finished, glass held high. Odette clapped with her chin lifted, vindicated at last. And Nadine, caught between 300 watching faces and the sick feeling rising in her own stomach, let a small, helpless smile pull at her mouth, because in that frozen second, she didn't know what else to do with her face. Vashti didn't stand. She lifted one hand, barely, off her lap, the small, calm motion you'd use to signal a waiter. Near the back doors, Marcus touched his earpiece and said a single word into it. The enormous display wall behind Cassius came alive. It didn't show a slideshow. It didn't show the company logo. It showed a face, her face, streamed live from a small camera near the front row, thrown 20 feet tall across the glass. Vashti, calm, looking straight ahead into the room. White letters wrote themselves beneath the image, one line at a time. A message from the majority owner. And then, smaller, final, the thing none of them had ever seen spelled out anywhere. Chair and founder, Calloway Standard Holdings. The room didn't gasp all at once. It came in a slow wave, rolling front to back, as person after person did the math. The owner nobody had ever laid eyes on. The name quietly attached to every check they'd ever cashed. It was the overnight facilities contractor's wife. It was the woman sitting in the front row that the man on stage had just called nothing, in front of everyone. Cassius turned toward the giant image of his wife on the wall behind him. His mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. Vashti stood then, unhurried, and the entire room's silence parted to let her through. She climbed the 3 steps into the light. Talia stepped back from Cassius without needing to be told, some old animal instinct already understanding exactly what was happening. Vashti crossed the stage, took the microphone gently out of her husband's slack hand, and turned to face the people who worked for her. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was level. It did not shake at all. "Every promotion handed out in this building tonight, I signed off on. Every raise, every title. A single breath, including his." Then she turned to Cassius and spoke quietly, close enough that the microphone barely caught it. And yet in that dead silent room, every single person heard it anyway. "You told this whole room I was never built for it. Cassius, I built the room." He scrambled for anything. "Vashti, baby, listen, I can explain. It's not, you told a woman on the phone I had nothing without you." She reached into the leather case and drew out a small keycard reader she'd had Marcus's team install on the podium that morning, connected to the building's executive access system. She set it on the podium and looked up into his face. "This region you were so proud of tonight, I approve a budget larger than it 3 times a year without feeling it leave my hand. Yours turned out to be the easiest access I ever had to shut off." She drew her father's brass key from the case, not to unlock anything, but simply to hold, the promise you carry people with. And for exactly 1 second her hand shook, because she knew better than anyone alive what that key had always meant to her. A door held open for people you trust. In 14 years, she had never once used what she'd built to close a door on somebody. She understood, in that shaking second, that if she pressed the button on that reader, some soft part of her father had spent 17 years protecting in her would close for good and never fully open the same way again. She pressed it anyway. Not a punishment dressed up as ceremony, just a line item her lawyers had drawn up that morning: the termination of Cassius Danforth's employment at Ashford Meridian, effective immediately, his executive badge going dark on every reader in the building at once. Her real name on the display, 20 feet tall, for 399 people to read slowly. The shake left her hand, so did something else, and she felt it go. "You're free to go, Cassius. You wanted to be a big man in a big room, so go on and look around. Right now, you're the smallest thing in it." She didn't smile when she said it. There was no triumph anywhere on her face. She had won completely, and it had cost her the last warm corner of a heart her father had spent 17 years working to keep soft. She stepped back from the microphone. The image behind her went dark, and only the woman remained standing in the light, holding an old brass key, quietly paying the price of what she'd just done. What happens to a man after an entire room learns his name was never the one that actually mattered. For a little while, it looked like nothing. Then it turned out to be everything. Cassius walked out of that tower into a city where his story had already arrived ahead of him. Ashford Meridian let him go clean on paper, but a firing that plays out 20 feet tall on a glass wall doesn't stay politely inside one building. It travels. The doors he'd always pushed open with a smile stayed shut now. Old contacts stopped returning calls. He'd spent 11 years learning exactly how to be a man in the light, and had never once learned how to be anything at all in the dark. And now the dark was the only room left to him. He reached out weeks later, humbled, asking Vashti for a short reference letter so he could start over somewhere small. She didn't answer with cruelty. She simply didn't answer. Some silences say everything a signature ever could. Talia did the math inside of a month. What? No title anymore. No regional salary. No solid ground. Just a man calling her too many times a day from a cousin's couch. She didn't scream at him or curse his name. She just stopped picking up, the same way she'd once looked straight through Vashti at the back of a room. Her fear had never actually loved him. It had only ever used him as a wall between herself and the poverty she'd fought her whole life to climb out of. And a broken man makes a poor wall. She transferred to a branch across town and left quietly. Here's the part that surprised everyone, including Talia herself. Vashti didn't fire her. She could have with a single sentence and nobody would have blamed her for it. But Vashti had sat too long on a cold kitchen floor, feeling like nothing to go build her own throne out of another frightened woman's wreckage. So Talia kept her job and lost her reputation in the hallways instead. Every colleague on every floor, now knowing exactly what she'd reached for, and exactly how badly she'd missed. It wasn't a clean fall. It was a slow one, earned, and it wasn't gentle to watch. Nadine was the one who broke in the right direction. 3 days after the gala, at a family dinner thick with silence, she stood up from her chair, hands shaking, and told the whole table the truth, that her brother had lied, that her mother had helped build that lie brick by brick, and that Vashti had spent years working herself half to death while being worth more than everyone at that table combined. It cost her plenty. Her mother didn't speak to her for months, but Nadine drove out to Vashti's door anyway, stood on the step with her eyes running over, and said, "I smiled on that stage. I'll be sorry for that every day I'm alive." Vashti opened the door and let her in. Odette was a different matter entirely, and this is where the story refuses to wrap up neatly, the way real life so often refuses. Odette lost nothing at all, kept her pearls and her comfortable house that had never once depended on her son to begin with. She never apologized, not to Vashti, not to her own daughter, not one single time. Instead, she went on the offensive with the only weapon she had left, her voice, telling anyone at church who'd lean an ear her way that Vashti was a cold, scheming woman who'd hidden a fortune for years just to trap a good man, then humiliated him publicly for sport. Some people believed her, some people still do. That particular lie never got its wall of glass, its front row seat, its moment of reckoning. It just settled into the corners of a family and stayed there. And Vashti made the choice not to chase it, because you cannot write a document that forces a proud woman to tell the truth. Some injustices you simply have to carry. So Vashti walked away with the company, and with her name finally in the light, and with a sister-in-law she never expected to keep. She walked away without the family she thought she'd married into, without the comfortable belief that being good is automatically enough to make people choose you, without the soft, untouched place inside her that the whole ordeal had cost. She was not untouched by any of it. Anybody who tells you the strong ones walk away clean has never actually stood close enough to watch one do it. She drove back east, back to Belhaven, back to the streets that go quiet after 7, and the sky that does most of the talking. Her father's old locksmith shop was still standing at the edge of town, boarded up and leaning, holding decades of machine oil in its walls. Vashti bought it back. She didn't turn it into a monument to herself, no plaque with her name on it anywhere. She cleaned it out with her own 2 hands, let light back through the front windows, and reopened its doors as a place where the town's young people could come learn a real trade. the way she once had. Quiet daytime hours, honest skills, machines to put their hands on. No cost at all for the families who couldn't pay. A 15-year-old boy walked in the first week, all elbows and attitude. The kind of kid who'd been getting into trouble for lack of anywhere else to be. She set him up at the old key-cutting machine and watched his whole face change the first time a clean copy slid out of it. She hung a new sign over the front counter, cut and fitted by her own hands, and this time the key on her father's old ring did exactly what he'd promised it would do all those years ago under the register light. It opened a door instead of closing one. It carried somebody instead of ending them. Nadine drove down most Saturdays to help restock the shelves, and the two of them didn't talk much while they worked, and that was perfectly fine. The door stayed open for her. The door stays open for anybody. Here's the last thing, and then I'll let you go. Your worth was never sitting in some bright room, waiting for applause to make it real. The people who work hardest to make you feel small are almost always standing on ground you laid for them, praying every single day that you never look down and notice whose ground it actually is. Vashti looked down. In the end, that was all it ever took. If this one got you tonight, drop a comment and tell us, should she have kept that reference letter unanswered, or was silence too gentle for what he did to her? Hit follow so the next story finds you the second it drops, and share this with the one friend who needs to hear it tonight.